About 20 years ago or so, shortly after Rav Soloveitchik was nifter, someone came out. I'm not sure whether it was the Orthodox Union or YU or someone else, came out with a videotape of Rabbi Jacob Schachter, Rabbi J.J. Schachter, who's of course Rabbi Lamb's successor at the Jewish Center. One of the first efforts of giving over the Rav's Torah. And the video that came out was focused on the Tisha B'Av service and the day of Tisha B'Av. Rabbi Schachter, in the name of the Rav, mentioned that Tisha B'Av is somewhat different than any other day. Of course, it's very different from any other day in the Jewish calendar. Ordinarily, we're not allowed to complain, to cry out bitterly too much to God. And the evidence for this is something that we say in the Yom Kippur service, where during the Musaf service, we read about the Asara Harugei Malchut, and the most very, very poignant part of the service is at the brutal torture and death of Rabbi Yishmael, one of the Tanaim of the Mishnah, where the Machzor says, Sarfei Malad Sa'akuba Mara, that the angels in heaven were crying out bitterly, Zu Torah v'zu schara, witnessing the terrible torture that Rabbi Yishmael was undergoing. God, this is Torah? This is its schar? How can you allow this to happen? And the response of God was, Anta bat kol mishamayim, that a bat kol came out, that heavenly voice came out from the heavens. Im eshma kol acher epoch et ha'olam l'mayim. Said, I don't want to hear anymore. No more crying. Stop. Enough. If I hear one more sound, I will turn the world over into water. I will change the world into water. L'tov vavo ashit adumim. Gzeira hi milfanai kabluha. It's my gzeira. It's my edict. It's my decree. And that's it. You have to accept it. That's the normal state of affairs. On Tisha B'Av, said Rav Soloveitchik, things are different. Tisha B'Av is our day where we are allowed to complain, where we are allowed to cry out bitterly to God at all the travails that He is, in effect, He is causing us. And we are allowed to raise our voices in bitterness and in anger almost to what is going on with us, to what is befalling us. And in fact, the tone of the keynote is said at the very last kina that we read at the night of Tisha B'Av. After hearing the 5 prakim of lamentation of Megillat Eicha, and we say another 3 keynote or so, or Motzei Shabbos, it's 4 keynote or so, the very last kina, as we're about to leave the shul, begins with the refrain, Ad ana b'chiyah b'tzion u'mispeid b'Yerushalayim. How much longer, God, will there be crying in Zion? How much longer is this going to be going on? How much longer is there going to be Tisha B'Av? Is there going to be tear? Are there going to be tears? Is there going to be despair? Is there going to be suffering by the Jewish people? Ad ana b'chiyah b'tzion u'mispeid b'Yerushalayim. Terachem Zion. Have mercy on Zion already. V'tivneh chomot Yerushalayim, and rebuild Yerushalayim. Terach, have mercy on Zion. Ad ana b'chiyah b'Zion. The kina, which is anonymous, we don't know who the author is, then goes on to state that all 12 of the constellations in the heaven, goes through the signs of the zodiac, and Shor, and Ta'omim, and all the 12 constellations, each in their own way, are crying, and we're about to leave the shul on Tisha B'Av night, and envision looking up at the heavens, envision the stars themselves crying out, the constellations themselves crying out to God on this terrible, awful night of Tisha B'Av. And then, of course, that sets the tone for the entire next day, when morning in its daylight really brings us no solace for our morning. Ad ana b'chiyah b'tzion u'mispeid b'Yerushalayim. The reason I bring this in is because the Perek of Tehillim that I was asked to present really bases itself, or I should say the other way around, that the author of this kin'ah that we say on Tisha B'Av bases himself on our Perek of Tehillim. Now, as I said, we're not ordinarily allowed to cry too much, and David HaMelech shows in this Perek, Yud Gimel, a great deal of bitterness, a great deal of anguish, as we'll see, but does it in a very succinct way. The whole Perek is only 6 psukim long. The first pasuk is Lamnatzeach Mizal David, so in essence, it's only 5 psukim long, the whole thing. But as we're going to see, that in 5 psukim, in the course of these 5 psukim, a great deal of change is going to happen in the tone. Let's read. As I said, Ad Ana, Lamnatzeach Mizal David. Ad Ana Hashem Tishkacheni Netzach. How much longer, God, are you going to forgive me? And I think we can put a question mark here. How much longer, God, are you going to forget me? Forget me. Tishkacheni. Netzach? Is it going to be forever? Is this going to go on forever? This suffering that I'm undergoing? Ad ana tastir et panecha mimeni. How much longer, God, are you going to hide your face from me? Pasuk Gimel. Ad ana ashit etzot benavshi. How much longer will I have to plan? Will I have to think of how I'm going to cope? How I am going to get through the day? Ad Mikra says, imagine someone ill, suffering in bed, hiding from an enemy, or suffering in bed with an illness, lying awake at night, thinking, how is he going to survive, or she going to survive the next day? How much longer am I going to have to plan out all kinds of ways to get through the next day? Yagon bilvavi yomam, only to find that the next morning everything is shot. All my plans were shot because there's even more suffering the next morning. Ad ana yarum oivi alai. How much longer will my enemies triumph? Will my enemies be on top of me? Will they triumph over me? All right. So we have in these 2 psukim the repetition of the words ad ana, how much longer, 4 times. We know that there's some sort of enemy. We don't know exactly what the situation is that David HaMelech was speaking. What was going on? Was he on the run from any one of his numerous enemies? Shaul HaMelech, Plishtim, Avshalom. Had no shortage of enemies, David HaMelech. Is that what David is going through? Well, let's look at the next pasuk. Habita, look, God, look at me. Aneni, answer me. Hashem Elokai, God, my God. Ha'ira einai, give me some inclination. Enlighten me as to what it is that you're doing in making me suffer so. Ha'ira einai pen ishan hamavet, so that I don't lay down to sleep and let that be my death sleep, that it be my last breath, that I don't lay down and sleep forever. Pen ishan hamavet. So it's not clear what David is up against here, whether it's an external enemy who speaks about oivai. It's not clear whether it's an illness, or he writes this for someone who had an illness and is worried, penishan hamavet, and is worried that ashit etzot benashi, who has to lie awake in a hospital bed all by him or herself and think about how to get through and the fear that entails. And in fact, when I began preparing this, I picked up a Sefer Tehillim in our shul, and it in fact said, to be said at a time when enemies are chasing you, when enemies are attacking, or at a time of illness. It's really applicable. It's really applicable to both, and that's what Dat Mikra, the Mossad Harav Kuk Tehillim, says as well. It's really not clear, and it really doesn't matter. It can be used. It can be used in both situations. Ad ana, 4 times. Next pasuk, hey, the next to the last. Pen yomar oivi yichaltiv, lest my enemies say, so that my enemy should not say, Yechaltiv. Aha! I got him. I've defeated him. I've overcome him. Pen yomar oivi yechaltiv. Sarai yagilu ki emot. That my enemies not rejoice because I have fallen. When I fall. Okay. Now, let's think for a minute what we've got here. As I said, we have the 4 ad-anas. But if you've also noticed or been paying attention here, we have a repetition of another word or phrase or motif in here. Look at pasuk bet. Ad-ana tastir et panecha mimeni. And now in our pasuk that we just read, hey, pen yomar oivi yechaltiv. Tzarai yagilu ki emot. That's pasuk K, and I skipped one at the end of pasuk Daled. Ha'ira einai pen ishan hamavet. There's also a repetition of this idea of panim. Tastir panecha, pen ishan hamevet, pen yomar oivi yechaltiv. This repetition of panim, pen, just a singular of panim, of the face, of the countenance, of God. Let's look at pasuk K, the pasuk we just read again. Pen yomar oivi yechaltiv. Let my enemy not say, aha, I've defeated him, I've conquered him. Tzaraya gilu ki emot. We think about this pasuk for a second. We notice that this is a very, very familiar motif to us. Why? Because in just 2 weeks we'll be reading Parshat Ki Tisa. Just next week we will have another fast day of Tanit Esther, and we'll be reading from Parshat Ki Tisa. And it's a Torah reading that we repeat constantly on every fast day from Parshat Ki Tisa, the story of Chet HaEgel, the story of the Yud Gimel Midot, the story of Moshe breaking the Luchot, or the aftermath of Moshe breaking the Luchot, actually. We say it all the time on the fast days. Lama yomru Mitzrayim le'mor bara'ah hotziyam laharog otam be'harim. Moshe, when he's faced with this tremendous crisis, Bnei Yisrael has fouled up things terribly. Pesach came, Yitziat Mitzrayim, Kriyat Yamsuf, Nisim, Niflaot, Makat Bechorot, Kriyat Yamsuf. The week of Pesach, Yitziat Mitzrayim, 210 years of slavery, finished, freedom. Another 7 weeks later, Matan Torah, Har Sinai, the revelation of God to man, the one and only time. And yet, after all that building excitement and that building closeness to God, just 40 days after Ma'amad Har Sinai, Kabbalah Satorah, Chet HaEgel, the 17th of Tammuz, Moshe comes down from Har Sinai, sees the people worshiping the calf, doing all kinds of other things, Chazal say, as well. In frustration, Moshe smashes the Luchot. Hashem says, Yashikoach sheshibarta. And Hashem says, that's it. The story's over. I wipe out every single one of them. Achaleo tam karega. And Moshe says, whoa, we got to do something? We got to do something real fast. And Moshe says, Lama yomru Mitzrayim no more. Wait a second, God. Let's think this out a little bit. You take Bnei Yisrael out of Egypt, you defeat Egypt, you dunk them into Yam Suf, and you drown them. And they'll say, whoever's left back in Egypt, who survives that, they'll say, here 40 days later, oh wow, he just killed them all off in the desert. Okay, so we couldn't defeat him, but that's because he couldn't do anything. This God of theirs couldn't do anything with him. He took him out to the desert so nobody should see. And there in Har Sinai, where nobody is there, he wipes out all 600,000 of them. You, God, want to give the Egyptians, leftover Egyptians, the satisfaction of hearing that? Lama yomru Mitzrayim le'mor bara hotziyam laharog otam be'harim. Why should you give the Egyptians that satisfaction? Shuv mecharon apecha v'yinachem al hara le'amecha. God, step back a bit. Don't get so angry so fast. V'yinachem al hara le'amecha. Let's think of it. Again, the same argument here. Pen yomar oivi yechaltiv, tzarai yagilu ki emot. Now, in the continuation of the Chet HaEgel story, this is exactly what Moshe said. Remember, I said that there's a repetition of pen, panim. Later on, after Hashem teaches Moshe Yud Gimel Midot, Moshe decides to go a step further and say, Hareini na et kvodecha. God, show me your face. I want to fully understand how it is that you, God, operate. Hareini na et kvodecha. I want to see your face. I want to see your panim. Echazet panecha. Hashem says, even you, Moshe, you can't go the full distance. Not the whole thing. You'll see my back. We say in Anim Zero, Kesher Tefillin Hera Le'anav. Moshe saw the Kesher of the Tefillin Shel Rosh of God, but not the face of God. But this is always the desire that we have. This is Moshe's desire. This is really all of our desire, especially at the time of suffering when we just don't understand why things are going on. Show me your face, God. Show me. Ha'ira einai pen ishan hamavet. Let us know what it is that you're doing here, because we do not understand it. Hareini na et kvodecha. Ha'ira einai pen ishan hamavet. Show us your face. Let's go back to the ad anas. Ad ana, ad ana, ad ana, ad ana, 4 times. That too, to me, sounds like the story of Ched HaEgel. And it reminds me of something else that Rav Soloveitchik says it's brought down in the beautiful Machzor that was put out by my friend Michael Taubes and Arnie Lustiger, of the Rav's teachings of Yom Kippur, that when Ne'ilah comes, and the day has gone on, and we've, since Mincha of Erev Yom Kippur, through Kol Nidre, through Shachris, through Musaf, and the Harugei Malchus that we read, and the Avoda, and everything, and Mincha, and Mafter Yonah, time after time we've spelled out our Chataim, Al Chet Shechatanu Fanecha, Al Chet Shechatanu Fanecha, going through the Aleph Bet, every single Chet, twice for each letter, and through all these tefillot. And when it comes to Ne'ilah at the end of the day and our strength is out, our words are out as well. We have no more words as well. What's left at Ne'ilah? We don't say the Al Chetz at Ne'ilah. Our words are gone. All we do during Ne'ilah is throw up our hands to heaven and say, help. We say the Yud Gimel Midot, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum L'Chanun. After 7 short slichot, relatively short things have to go fast. It's Ne'ilah. We just say Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum L'Chanun, Erech HaPayim, Rev Chesed V'Emes. We throw ourselves to the mercy of the court. God, the Yud Gimel Midot that you taught Moshe at the time of the Chet HaEgel, constantly repeating Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum L'Chanun. These Yud Gimel Midot. That's all the words that we have left at the end of Ne'ilah. And look here, Ad Ana, Ad Ana. Doesn't it sound exactly the same? I think David HaMelech here is alluding to the Yud Gimel Midot as well. Look, really, that's all that I got. I want to see your face, God, like Moshe Rabbeinu, but nothing else really remains. Ad Ana. I can't do anything other than to call out to you, Hashem, Hashem, Ad Ana, Ad Ana, an allusion to the Hashem, Hashem, Adonai, Adonai of the Yud Gimel Midot. I think there's something else here too. I think that David HaMelech is onto something that the psychologist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross only delineated in the 20th century about the stages of grief and the stages of loss. Kubler-Ross writes that when someone is grieving, the first stage is one of denial. You just deny that it actually happened. Then it shifts over to anger. And that's what we have at the beginning here. Adonai, how much longer? How much longer is this going to be going on? Adonai, anger, bitterness, frustration. But anger and bitterness and frustration gives way, eventually, says Kubler-Ross, to bargaining. That's the next stage, the next phase. Make a bargain. And that's what Pasuk K is. It's a bargain. Pen Yomar Vayichal Tiv. that what? You're going to let my enemies have the upper hand? You're going to let my enemies have the satisfaction of defeating me? Anger and shock. Anger. Bargaining. And that brings us to Pasuk Vav, the last Pasuk. The next stage says Kubla Ross. And I think was anticipated very nicely by David HaMelech as well. Resolution and acceptance. Pasuk Vav. Va'ani b'chasdecha batachti. So after all, God, I trust in your chesed. I have trusted in your chesed, in your kindness. And when all is said and done, that's what I've got left. Yageli b'bishuatecha. My heart will exult, my heart will be delighted, will be thrilled, will be exultant if you save me. But no matter what, Ashir ala Hashem, I'll sing out to God, Ki gamal alai. Because whatever you do, you've done justly, and you've done what it is that you saw fit and that you see fit. Ashir ala Hashem, no matter what, Ki gamal alai. Resolution, acceptance, is what the anger and the bitterness eventually gives way to. I think I'd like to close with a very, very personal note to Sarah, even though I'm sharing it with everyone. Sarah and I have been friends for well over 30 years. And we've, over the past few years, been able to renew that friendship because Dina has been going back to Marasha as the camp doctor. And most of those years, I've been able to come up and join her to camp. And my children have seen, and I've noticed in myself, that every summer when I go up to camp and driving up Route 247, and passing Camp Wayne, and passing DJs, and passing Rabbi Cohen and Rabbi Willig at the Kollel, as we finally make the left turn off 247 into camp, that a change comes over me, that we've entered the Marashat time warp, as it were. And I become a different person, I know. Feeling much younger. 30 years evaporate. And a large part of Yageli be of my happiness at being able to be back in camp and to be with very good friends is due to my very good friend Sarah Lamb Dratch. Sarah has always made me and many, many others laugh and feel good, and we can joke around like only friends that have been friends for a very long time can do. Yageli bi. She makes me very, very happy and makes my heart glad. Ashir la Hashem ki gamal alai. Sarah and I became friends all those years ago, mostly through song. And songs to God. I share you, God, we've sung God to you. All kinds of songs. Songs, many of them she wrote to Hashem, Ashir al Hashem. Bugsy Siegel on the banjo, Ellie Dobin on the guitar, the A-porch, sitting on the lake and broiling like a red lobster, Sarah with the paddles of the rowboat hanging out, singing on the waters of Babylon and Lake Marasha, Ashir al Hashem. Sarah, we've both trusted in God and in His chesed. We both are Yagel Libi. We all, I should say, all of us listening to this, and all of your friends and family, want us to have this Sarah back from the 1980s when we were young, healthy, didn't have the cares of life and the responsibilities that life many, many years later has given us. We all want to sing with you, Sarah. Ashir al Hashem. We all want to sing together with you. when you have your refuah shlema, and we're all praying, Sarah, me especially, that this summer you'll be back in camp, and nagel libenu in your full and complete refuah.